Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to the Stob lecture series. My name is Michael Wiltskett, and I have the privilege of directing the January series at Calvin University, of which the Stob lectures are actually a really important part of that program. The Stob lecture series are sponsored annually by Calvin University and Calvin Theological Seminary in honor of Dr. Henry J. Stob. These lectures explore topics in ethics, apologetics, and philosophical theology, offering thoughtful engagement for students, faculty, and the broader academic community. Dr. Henry Stob served Calvin College as Associate Professor of Philosophy from 1939 to 1943, before entering the United States Navy as a lieutenant. After his discharge in 1946, he returned to Calvin as Professor of Philosophy until 1952, when he was appointed Professor of Ethics and Apologetics at Calvin Theological Seminary. Dr. Stob retired in 1975 and received the Distinguished Alumni Award in 1976, marking a remarkable 33-year legacy of teaching and shaping students. The Stob lecture today is funded by the Henry Stob Endowment, and we are deeply grateful to the Stob family for their ongoing support. Their generosity allows us to bring distinguished speakers from all around the world. Past lecturers included Louis Smedes, Richard Mao, Miroslav Wolf, Sujin Pak, Lydia Dugdale, and now my friend Christopher Watkin. It is now my pleasure to invite Dr. Judith Yanto, Chief Academic Officer and Professor of History of Christianity and Reformed Theology here at Calvin Theological Seminary, to introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Mike, and good evening, everyone. Before I introduce our speaker, let us begin with a prayer. Let us pray. Our triune God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, we praise you. We thank you for your work in this world, for us, for our salvation, and especially we thank you for Dr. Henry Stob and the work that he did for your kingdom, and how he has blessed, and he blessed so many generations of Christians and leaders and thinkers. We thank you for gathering us tonight as we celebrate Dr. Stob's legacy and also to learn more from our speaker tonight, Dr. Christopher Watkin. Be with us and guide us, and may this evening be a blessing for us, and may what we do tonight, be glorifying to you. In Jesus Christ we pray. Amen. Our speaker, Dr. Christopher Watkin, is a senior lecturer in French studies at Monash University in Melbourne, Australia. He became a Christian when he was about 15 years old, he said, and since then he has been fascinated by the ways in which philosophy and contemporary culture can be brought into conversation with Christian theology. Thank you for the light. He did his undergraduate work in modern and medieval languages, French and German in particular, at Jesus College in Cambridge from 1998 to 2002. During that time, he spent a wonderful year in Paris as a part of his study. Lovely. In 2002 and 2003, he completed his Master of Philosophy in European Literature and Culture with essays on, listen to this, Derrida and Calvin. I would like to read your paper, by the way. That is a combination, all right? And for that program, for the Master of Philosophy program, he wrote a dissertation on Paul Ricoeur, on Ricoeur's work on justice. He then received the Arts Humanities Research Council funding or scholarship to do his PhD work in French philosophy, also at Cambridge. He has published several books. I will mention just a few, the ones that I'm very interested in. The first one, coming from his PhD dissertation, is Phenomenology or Destruction, with a question mark, 2009, in which he explored the complex relationship between two major philosophical tendencies in the thought of Maurice Merleau-Ponty, Paul Ricoeur, Jean-Luc Nancy. In his second book, Difficult Atheism, 2011, he examined how three contemporary thinkers, Alain Badiou, Jean-Luc Nancy and Quentin Meillassoux make sense of the world without the gods of metaphysics, poetry, and religion, and how their three positions critique and refine each other. His third book was French Philosophy Today, New Figures of the Human in Badiou, Meillassoux, Malbou, Serres, and Latour, in which he argues that very different contemporary thinkers each rely on a host to make sense of the human, whether it can be a capacity, substance, or narrative. He has also published other books titled From Plato to Postmodernism, The Story of Western Culture Through Philosophy, Literature, and Art, published in 2011, and Thinking Through Creation, Genesis 1 and 2 as Tools of Cultural Critique, 2017. That book is aimed at non-specialist audience to go on a journey through the ways in which ideas shape ourselves and our world. And in 2022, he published his Biblical Critical Theory, How the Bible's Unfolding Story Makes Sense of Modern Life and Culture. He states that at its broadest, his research seeks to study how people make sense of the world and how they interact with ideas and positions different from their own. Currently, as though he was not busy enough, he is also doing another research project exploring the different ways in which the modern West has made sense of the ideas of emancipation and liberation. Let's welcome our speaker, Dr. Christopher Watkin.
To give you a word of encouragement and something to think about. We are going to think together this evening about artificial intelligence. And as a philosopher, I love AI. Let me tell you why. Because people like me have been sitting in our book-lined offices for years, in our tweed jackets, puffing our pipes, asking questions like, what is a human being? And what is work about? What is the meaning of work? And nobody has been interested. I wrote a book back in 2016 about what a human being is, and both people who read it thought it was quite interesting. And then suddenly, since around November 2022, YouTube is being flooded with videos of people without any particular religious conviction asking the question, what is a human being? And what is the point of work? And the reason that people are suddenly asking these questions is that artificial intelligence has raised them. If AI is becoming increasingly human-like in some of the ways that it relates to us, then it's unavoidable to think, what is it then about us that makes us different to this thing that speaks to me as if it were a human? And if, as some people are claiming today, AI will do all economically significant work in society within, a decade or so, naturally you've got to ask the question then, well, what's the point of human work? What do we think we're achieving when we work? And so it really is Christmas time at the moment for people who are asking those sorts of questions. And of course, philosophers are one group in society who are doing that, but also these are questions, aren't they, dear to Christians as well. The Bible has very rich responses to the questions, what is a human being? And what is the point of work? And so one of the messages that I'd love to leave you all with this evening to think about is this is a very exciting time to be a Christian in our society, because people broadly are asking the sort of questions to which the Bible has brilliant answers in a way that those questions haven't necessarily been asked in recent times. But it's a bit bewildering, isn't it, looking out at all the different opinions that there are about AI today. As far as I can see, there are three broad camps that people fall into. Let's call them the doomers, the boomers, and the scoffers. So first of all, you've got the doomers. And these are no crackpot marginal figures. You've got people central to the development of artificial intelligence. People like Geoffrey Hinton in the UK, very respected person in the world of AI, won the Turing Prize a couple of years ago, who would say, were he standing here now, and I've seen him say this on YouTube, that he thinks the odds of human extinction as a result of AI are between 10 and 20%. That is the same odds as an adult male dying from cardiac arrest. Human extinction. No, he's no marginal figure in AI. And then on the other side of the ledger, you've got the the boomers. People with wildly utopian claims about what AI can achieve. So, for example, Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, says that there is what he calls a Moore's law for everything. Moore's law is this idea that the processing capacity of transistors on microchips doubles every 1.5 years or so. And he is applying that to the whole of society. And he is saying that once AI really takes off, the price of groceries, price of houses will plummet, will halve almost every year, to the point where these things become trivially affordable. AI will solve all of our financial problems, do all of the work that we do today. I've just finished reading a book by another leading light in the AI world, a guy called Nick Bostrom, who works at Oxford. He's just published a book recently called Deep Utopia. And the language that he uses in that book is that we now live in a solved world. Astonishing, isn't it? And again, he's no marginal figure. He's very respected within AI. And he thinks all our problems are solved. All our problems of human disease and human unhappiness sorted. And the only issue that we've got now is how to live meaningful lives when there's nothing meaningfully left for us to do, because AI will have done it all. That's why he wrote the book, Deep Utopia. Extraordinary claims for AI from leading figures in the area. And then, of course, you've got the third group who are the scoffers. You know, AI is just a bubble. It's a lot of hype, like the dot-com bubble of the late 90s. This will pass. The economy will return to normal. So, for example, the co-founder of Google Brain, a guy called Andrew Ng, says that there's as much problem with the idea of killer robots with AI coming for us as there is with the problem of the overpopulation of Mars. Just not a problem. Like, we're getting our knickers in a twist about this. In a way, is that a phrase you use over here? No. Okay. Well, in England, we're getting het up about this. Excuse the Anglicism. In a way that's completely unnecessary. So there are these three very, very different groups, all of whom seem to have some credibility and authority within the world of AI. So what are people like you and me to make of this landscape of wildly different predictions? Well, I want to suggest that there's an opportunity to take and a danger to avoid. And the opportunity to take is that I think we're living right now through what we could think of as the horseless carriage moment of AI. So think back to the invention of the automobile around 1895. People did not know what to make of these new things that were appearing on roads, so as we humans always do, they made sense of them in terms of categories that were familiar to them. This thing looks like a carriage, but it doesn't have a horse. There must be a horseless carriage. And it took a while, didn't it, for the automobile to find its own place in society, and I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that since then it has changed the Western world. But there was a period where we didn't know what to make of it yet, so we're grasping all sorts of different categories to try and make sense of it. And it appears to me that that's very much the position that we're in with artificial intelligence now. It hasn't yet carved out its own space in our social imaginary. We don't quite know what to do with it yet. And so all of the options are on the table. Some people treating large language models and the output they give you as some sort of deity, kowtowing to whatever it says, giving it ultimate authority. We've got many people today, haven't we, treating large language models as intimate partners, seeking emotional fulfillment in the discourse that we have with them. Some people treating AI as slaves, and some people treating it as a machine. So all the options are open. So this is a key moment when society is coming to terms with this new technology, and therefore where Christians can have a voice and speak and help shape the public conversation as these ideas around AI solidify in ways that will be both beneficial, hopefully, to society and also glorifying to God. So that's the opportunity. We're in the horseless carriage moment of AI. But I think there's also a danger that I see in the way that some Christians speak about AI. And it's the same danger that Christians faced in the 19th century with the advance of science. And so some Christian thinking fell into what's become called the God of the gaps theology. And so the idea was that God must be found in those areas of life or those phenomena that science has not yet explained. Now, the problem with that, of course, is that as the 19th century progressed, science was able to explain more and more. So the God of the gaps get squeezed ever tighter. Now, of course, it was a silly position to take to begin with, because we know from Hebrews 1 that God upholds all things by the word of his power, not only those things that science has not yet explained. But the sense that it gave was that Christianity was passing away. If Christianity can only exist in those areas that science has not explained, and science is explaining more and more, then Christianity looks increasingly like a thing of the past. And what we're sometimes falling into today, I fear, as Christians, is what we might call a humanity of the gaps. So there's a lot of discourse that says, yes, AI is very good at this, that, and the other, but AI will never fill in the blanks, and that's what it means to be human. The problem is, if you look back to the 1950s, there have been a whole string of AI will nevers, and AI often has. So AI will never be able to use natural language in the way that we can. AI will never be able to be creative in any way that we recognize, and so forth. And lots of these statements throughout history, and AI has done many of these things. And so the danger is, in the same way that the God of the gaps got squeezed, our sense of what a human being is will get squeezed. And so much of the discourse today around AI is grouped in what we can call as an acronym the SACI, S-A-C-I, qualities of humanity. Is it sentient? Does it have agency? Is it conscious? And is it intelligent? And a huge amount of the thinking around AI and humanity focuses on these human capacities, with the implicit idea being that if AI can do these things, then it will be like us. I want to try and convince you this evening that that is fundamentally flawed thinking. It's not only flawed thinking in terms of AI, but it's actually really dangerous thinking about human beings generally. Because if we define ourselves by our capacities, then there will always be some people who don't have those capacities, who by our definition then are outside the pale of humanity. Philosophers like Peter Singer have made this argument very strongly. If we say we are human because of our intelligence, then there will be edge cases like very, very young babies and elderly people with Alzheimer's and other diseases of age that seem to fall outside the pale of what it means to be human. And for whatever capacity we choose, we're always excluding some people. So regardless of the fact that we're talking about AI this evening, I think defining us by our capacities is an incredibly dangerous and insidious thing to do, but particularly when it comes to AI. So what I would love this evening is to try and set out a way of understanding human beings that doesn't rely on our capacities that nevertheless helps us to see in the ways in which we are significantly different from large language models and artificial intelligence more broadly, and therefore to set the Christian position in the current debate on what I think is a firmer foundation than simply saying, oh, it will never be conscious or it will never be intelligent or whatever. And I want to try and do that through hitting some of the main moments in the biblical storyline. I've become swept off my feet by the way in which the Bible story from Genesis to Revelation provides a compelling framework for Christians to understand everything. So rather than picking one particular doctrine or one particular portion of Scripture and trying to hang our whole idea of artificial intelligence off that, it's often the image of God, isn't it, in Genesis 1, I want to try and give a sense of how the different moments in the biblical story build up a picture of humanity that is fundamentally different to large language models that are used today. I'm just going to hit 3 key points. So I'm going to talk a little bit about creation, and then the fall, and then redemption. So there's vast swathes of Bible that I'll be missing out, but hopefully that'll give us some sort of a sense of how the rhythm of the Bible helps us to understand human beings. So let's begin with creation. Now, I don't really want to talk about the image of God, not because it is not crucially important, but because many, many Christians have done that already very well. I want to take a different angle on creation and look at something different in the opening chapters of Genesis that helps us to understand who we are as humans and then helps us to think about artificial intelligence in relation to who we are. And I want to look at the way in which the communion that God, the Creator, has with Adam and Eve, his creatures, frames the commission that he gives them. Be fruitful, fill the earth, have dominion. So communion frames commission. In other words, what Adam and Eve have to do in the world, their job, makes sense because of their relationship to God. Makes sense in the context of that relationship. That it is their Creator who is giving them these commands, telling them what to do. You take that context out of it, and it becomes very much harder to understand what Adam and Eve are doing in the world. Communion frames commission. Now, large language models are brilliant at commission, aren't they? You give them a job to do, and they can do it. They can organize your data. They can compose your email. But they lack the overall framing communion that makes sense of that commission. And so I want to encourage us to think about the work that we do in the world as significant and important for us as human beings, but not for the reason that's often given by people. So some people will say, AI is very likely to do all the economically significant work within a decade, and that is wonderful, they will say. We have nothing left to do, so we can enjoy ourselves. We can do all the hobby projects that we've been longing to do for ages. That's one view of these things. Another view of these things is that people say, well, that would be terrible, because we find our identity in our work. What it means to be a human is to be a worker. I am who I am because of my work. I want to suggest that neither of those positions really captures the biblical reality. Because as Christians, in the same way that we don't want to say, I am my intelligence, I am who I am because of my rationality or because of my consciousness or whatever, I don't think we want to say our identity is found in our work. That seems a little bit sub-biblical to me. My identity is found in my relationship with God. And if my identity is found in my work, what does that say about people who are unable to work for one reason or another? It's not very good news for them. But I think we do want to say that as Christians, if AI were to take all of our work away from us, that there would be a loss. Not because we would lose our identity, but because we would lose one of the ways of expressing our relationship to God, our communion. So our commission, do this in the world, comes out of that communion. It's one of the ways, not the only way, that we express who we are before God and that we work out our relationship with him. And if that were taken away from us, if there were nothing left to do in the world, we would lose that one organ of expression of who we are before God. And so it would not be good news I think, for Christians, if AI did all the economically valuable work for us. But there's another reason, a parallel reason, I think, in Genesis, why we think about work as Christians in a very particular way. One word that's often used in AI circles to talk about what AI benefits us with is the word friction. So you will hear people say, AI takes the friction out of work. So for example, instead of having to type an email myself and it take quite a while and it drain me mentally, AI will draft it for me and I quickly read it through and then send it. That's reducing friction in the world. And people like Bostrom will say that this friction can be reduced to almost zero. We can get AI to do all the burdensome work for us. And won't that be wonderful, according to him? And again, I'm not sure that for Christians it would. Because if you think about the Genesis account, God did not have to involve Adam and Eve in filling the world and subduing it, did he, before the fall? Like, he could have created a world already filled and already subdued and not involved them at all. And yet he chose, before the fall, remember, so this is not a result of sin, he chose to involve Adam and Eve in this work. And so I think we as Christians need to distinguish between friction, on the one hand, the effort of doing things, and frustration, on the other hand. What the fall introduces into the human experience is not friction, it's not having to do things, it's not gardening as such, or having babies as such. It's the pain and the frustration that comes with those things. And so friction is not something that as Christians we should want to eliminate completely from our experience. In fact, friction is formation. Friction is how we grow and develop as human beings. Not necessarily the bitter frustration and fruitlessness of a lot of our work, but the fact that we invest ourselves in things and build things and make things. Imagine, and you'll have to imagine because this never happens, if I went to a gym one day, I'm unlikely to be seen anywhere near a gym, but imagine I was there. And I was being given a tour of the gym by a personal trainer. And the personal trainer said, how much weight would you like me to put on this bench press machine, whatever it's called? No, you have no idea. You're going to have to run with this. And imagine that I said to him or her, oh, none. I would like 0 weight at all, please. Their next question to me would be likely to be something to the effect of, well, why are you here? Why are you even in the gym? The whole point of this is that the resistance will form you and build you. Like, do something else. And similarly, if we want to be in God's world and have no friction at all in anything that we do, then I think that the question is legitimately raised of us, then why are you here? What are you doing in life? What do you think this is about, this life that we live? So to distinguish between friction and frustration, and not to see friction as something that we should reduce to zero. What AI does bring, I think, is a new problem to us. The AI expert at Dallas Theological Seminary, John Dyer, has this wonderful illustration, and I'll use his illustration now. He says, for almost all of human history, we've had one problem with calories, which was how to get enough. How do I harvest enough grain or kill enough animals to keep me alive? That is your one problem. But really quite recently in human history, we've been faced with the second problem, which is how many calories are too many? It's now possible to overconsume in the same way that it's always been possible to underconsume. And so we have to suddenly adapt to a very new situation in which it's not only how do I get enough, it's how do I make sure I don't have too much? And we may be entering a similar situation with friction in work. So throughout the whole of human history, including the Industrial Revolution, the question has always been, how do we make work easier? How do we reduce friction? How do we get more done with less energy and less time? And the prospect is now raising itself. No one knows for sure, but it may well be that with AI able to do huge amounts of work very efficiently indeed, the new question arises, well, how much friction does a human being need in their lives? How much friction is the right amount? Not simply how do I reduce it down to zero? It takes a lot of adapting, doesn't it? In the same way that we're still in the throes of adapting to the calorific surplus that's now available to us, it's hard to shift these instincts that have been there for thousands of years. It's a very new problem, very hard to grapple with. So, in terms of creation, we've got the idea that communion frames commission, and we've got the idea of how much friction does a person need. Friction is formation for us, not just something that we need to reduce. Let's move now to the second big moment of the Bible story, the fall. And here I want to begin by raising the question with you, what is the distinctive quality of humanity in chapters Genesis 1 to 3 by comparison with the other animals? Now, of course, there's the image of God, and if we want to go into that in Q&A, I'm very happy to talk about the image of God. But again, I just want to bracket that because that's been written about very well by many Christians, and it's easily available information. I want to focus on something else. Is it a human distinctive that God addresses us personally? Well, no, because he also addresses the birds and the fish. Multiply, he says, fill the earth. So that's not unique to human beings. What seems to be unique to human beings is that God holds us accountable for the way that we treat him and his words. Do not eat from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, for if you eat of it, you will surely die. And indeed, when they eat of it, they are held to account by God. It seems fundamental to the human condition in the early chapters of Genesis that we are accountable beings. That if we do something wrong, we have to answer for what we have done. And there are consequences for what we have done. And the only way to deal with that, we learn further on in the Bible, is to repent, to seek forgiveness at the throne of God. Now, it is very unclear that anything like that can obtain for a large language model. So, for example, if ChatGPT 5.1 encourages someone to commit suicide, and they commit suicide, what do you hold to account? Do you hold to account one instance of the large language model running on one particular server somewhere? Do you hold to account the weights that shape that model? Do you hold to account every instance of that model running on any server throughout the world? You see, there's no localized instance of a large language model that can, even in principle, be accountable. You would probably sue the company. You sue the people, wouldn't you? It's people who are accountable for these things. But we're different. There's only one of me, and there's only one of you. And here I am, and here you are. And we have one life to live, don't we? Hebrews 9:27. Human beings are destined to die once, and after that to face judgment. We live life once, forwards, and are accountable at the end. But with a large language model, if it does something that's wrong, you can readjust its weights. You retrain it, don't you? It doesn't repent. You recalibrate it, and then you go again. You reset it. It can have another go in the way that we can't in our lives. So we are not only accountable constitutively as human beings, we're also finite, aren't we? I've got one body, here it is, it's not anywhere else. I was brought up speaking English as my first language, not any other language. I subsequently learned French and German, not other languages. I was brought up in England, in South Yorkshire, in God's own country, near Barnsley. I'm out here doing missionary work. And not anywhere else. And each of us in the room has a similar story, don't we? And therefore, because you and I are finite, the choices that we make in life have stakes. They mean something. They matter. Just take a quick glance at the person next to you. Now, don't stare at them, that might freak them out, but take a little glance. That person has sacrificed almost everything, has made an almost infinite sacrifice to be here this evening. Because they and you will only ever have this evening once in your life. Never get a chance to replay it. And of all the things that you could potentially have done with this evening, spent it with your family, spent it in prayer to God, watched your favorite show on television, whatever it is, you have sacrificed all of those things to listen to an Englishman witter on about AI. There are stakes, aren't there, to the choice that we've made tonight. It matters, because we will never get this evening again. We've made our bet. I think I'm going to go and listen to this talk, and we can never get that stake back. There are stakes to the choices that we make as human beings. But also, of course, if anyone's feeling really sort of miffed at being here now, let me suggest that there are also stakes to any choice. So if you had chosen not to be here this evening, there are also consequences, aren't there? It may be that someone in the audience today meets their future spouse this evening. Who knows? It may be that a word that was shared before the talk or a word that will be shared after the talk changes someone's life this evening. Maybe that you are able to give that word to someone else. It may be that you receive that word. We don't know as human beings, do we? But what we do know is that whether we chose to be here or whether we wish we were someone else, and perhaps we'll choose next time not to come to one of these talks, there are stakes. It's a meaningful choice because we only get to live this evening once. You'll never get it back. But that is not the case for a large language model that you can reset, that you can run in multiple instances, functionally infinite number of instances around the world at the same time. So our finitude, the fact that there's only one of me and we only have one life to live, makes our choices weighty, doesn't it? It matters whether we choose to be here or not, and all the other choices that we make in life. And that mattering, those stakes to our choices, are not replicated by large language models, however much they look human, because they can be reset and started again. They do not live once, die once, and then face judgment. So, in terms of the fall, we've got both our accountability to God, which is a human distinctive, and our finitude. We've got one life, live it once, never repeat any evening or morning for the whole of our lives, die and face judgment. It's another human distinctive. Let's move on to redemption now. Of course, this is the vast majority of the Bible, isn't it, the story of redemption. We've only got time to look at one very, very small moment of redemption. I just want to focus on the incarnation of Christ. And that there would be much to say about the cross, there would be much to say about the resurrection. But just to keep it within the bounds that I've been given, I just want to talk about the incarnation tonight. Something extraordinary happens, does it not, in the incarnation, which is that a God who has always been, in a sense, over against us, out there, speaking to us, of course, conversing with us, but in sort of a face-to-face way, if we can use that language rather clumsily. It's been a reciprocal relationship with God. In the incarnation, God also becomes mutually related to us. So from reciprocity to mutuality. In other words, God ceases to be over against us, talking with us, and becomes a sharer in our condition, like us, participates in humanity. This is a scandal of John chapter 1, isn't it? The Word became flesh. It's very extreme language. It's not the Word dressed up like flesh for a while and was indistinguishable to the naked eye. It's not the Word made a good job of looking like flesh for a period. It's not the world was vanishingly close to flesh. No, the Word, the Logos, the eternal Logos, became flesh. So Jesus had lungs like your lungs, and he took in air and he extracted the oxygen from it, and that's the way that he kept alive, just like you. Jesus got dirt under his fingernails, just like you do. He got tired, just like you and I do. He died, just like we will. He shares in our condition. As the Isaiah 53 says about the suffering servant, he is familiar with suffering. He doesn't just know about it. He shares it. He suffered. himself. So, from a relationship of reciprocity, God out there speaking to us, God is in a relationship of mutuality, not over against us, shoulder to shoulder with us, sharing in our condition. And that is a million miles away from what a large language model is capable of. Now, large language models are brilliant, virtuosic at reciprocity. You give them a prompt, they give you a very erudite and fine-tuned answer, often better than what almost any human could give you. Ask them a question, they'd give you a response. It's a very reciprocal relationship. But they are incapable of mutuality, incapable of sharing in our condition. So, a few weeks ago, my wife and I went on a lovely holiday, just the two of us. It was a real treat. Her sister was taking care of our kids for 2 days. And we're eternally grateful. And we went to this beautiful town of Fairhaven on the coast in Victoria, near Melbourne, in Australia. Is the TV show Round the Twist, the children's show, was that ever aired in this country? It's a lighthouse, and there are various goings-on around this lighthouse. Anyway, it's where that was filmed. So it's a beautiful, beautiful place. And it was so restorative. We went there tired, we left re-energized, we'd connected on a much deeper level than we were able to at home, we'd enjoyed good food together. It had just been a wonderful holiday. And a large language model could write to you a very convincing account of a holiday like that, of how restorative it was, of how beautiful it was. It could write an account that would bring a tear to your eye, or could leave you in stitches of laughter. But what a large language model could not do is enjoy a holiday like that, because it doesn't need refreshing, doesn't need to connect again more deeply, doesn't thrill to be away from the kids. Don't tell them that. Because its relationship with us is ruthlessly reciprocal. It is not mutual. And I want to suggest that this is a fundamental difference. It's not just a sort of a happenstantial difference, because some people will say, well, look, it looks mutual. Like, it can act well at being mutual. It feels human. When you're engaging with a large language model, you're giving it prompts and it's giving you responses, it can feel very human. And they would say, so what's the difference? I want to suggest that there is a big difference. I want to do so by using 2 thought experiments with you. So just run with me for a moment. First thought experiment. Just imagine that one of the great works of literature, choose whatever your favorite novel or play is. Let's say it's either Shakespeare's Hamlet or Anna Karenina or something like that. Imagine that we found out, and I know this can never happen, it's a thought experiment. Imagine that we found out that all along, this great work of literature had been written, lo and behold, by a large language model. Exactly the same words, nothing changes, just that now we know it was written by ChatGPT rather than a human being. Would our relationship to that text, would our sense of what that text is change? I think for most of us it would. I think it matters that William Shakespeare wrote Hamlet. And it's not because of the words. The words could be exactly the same. It matters to us in some way that's beyond the words, that Shakespeare shared the human condition with us. He was a person like I am a person. Had that mutuality of relationship. That changes the way we read Hamlet or Anna Karenina, or whatever it is. Second thought experiment is, if a large language model told you, I love you, or I forgive you, would that land with us in the same way that it would if a human told us the same thing? Before we hasten to a conclusion, let me introduce a rather uncomfortable fact into the conversation, which is that a study that came out earlier this year in the Harvard Business Review showed that the single most prominent use of AI, among all the things that it's used for, large language models, was for intimate partnership and friendship. most people use large language models, mostly for friendship and for intimate relations. So it seems clear, doesn't it, that most people, when they hear words like "I love you" from a large language model, that does mean something to them. It's a fascinating, unnerving fact, isn't it? I want to dig a little bit under the surface. What's going on when a large language model... Let's take the example of "I forgive you." What needs to be in place for the words "I forgive you" to mean something? Well, let me suggest that there are 3 criteria that need to be fulfilled. The first is what philosophers call the criterion of authority. In other words, the person who is doing the forgiving has to be wronged. Now, if the person sitting next to you, and this will never happen, the person sitting next to you is a lovely, lovely person, but if the person sitting next to you hit you in the face in the next second or so, hypothetically, and I said, "Oh, I forgive you," you would be sitting there thinking, "Who are you to forgive them? I was the one who got socked in the face. It's my job to forgive." In other words, it is the wronged party who has the right to forgive, and not some random third party. You have to be wronged to forgive. But how can you wrong a large language model that has no needs in the world, that has no stakes in what it says in the world? It's very hard to see what it would mean to wrong a large language model. The second criterion, after the first criterion of authority, is the criterion that the wronged party has to share some sort of reality with the one who's wronged them. So, for example, I can't forgive a character in a book in the same way that I can forgive another human being, because we share a reality. And so, again, it's unclear what that could possibly mean in the case of a large language model. And the third criterion is the criterion of what's called uptake. In other words, the forgiveness has to change the relationship in some way. We have to act in line with the fact that forgiveness has happened in this relationship. And again, it's very unclear what that can possibly be in relationship with a large language model. Now, some people might be thinking at this point, it's very clear what that would be. You engineer that into the way that it behaves. You make it such that if it forgives someone or someone forgives it, then you make sure that it behaves in a different way. But that's not participation, is it? That's imitation. You're making it a better mimic of human relationships, rather than it participating in the stakes of human relationships. And a lot of the debate around AI consciousness and intelligence and so forth seems to me to miss that crucial distinction. It's about how to make AI a better and better mimic of humans to the point where it's indistinguishable. But that misses that to mimic is not to participate. To say, "I forgive you," and to then use language consonant with having forgiven someone is not the same as forgiving someone, because of that crucial distinction between imitation and participation. When I say, "I love you," to my wife, someone might object, "Well, hold on, you're doing exactly the same thing as a large language model has done, haven't you? You didn't invent those words. You're quoting what millions of people like you have said in millions of situations like this to millions of people like her." And isn't that what a large language model does? That having ingested pretty much all the data on the internet, it is very good at predicting what certain words will follow a particular sequence. So if you give it a particular question, it predicts the next words in the sequence astonishingly well. So someone might say, that's what you're doing when you say "I love you" to your wife. You're just predicting the next sort of thing that a person like you would say in a situation like this. But I'm not sure that that's the same at all. It is true, of course, that I didn't invent that combination of 3 words, that it's a quoted term that I'm sort of taking out of the cultural air around me and using in a particular situation. But the difference is that if I am using those words sincerely as a human being, they commit me. I should behave in a particular way, having said those words. They make me sort of commit to particular ways of treating the person I've said I love you to, and they make other ways of behaving inconsistent with that. In other words, I have to be sincere. I have to follow through on that language that I've used. Problem with large language models, as they're currently constructed, as I understand it, is that they cannot be sincere. They can't lie either, actually, because the way that they think bears no relationship to truth at all. Now, there's a philosophical term for this. The philosopher Harry Frankfurt wrote a book with rather a rude title. So I'll just use the abbreviation. His work is called On BS. And he defines BS as a very precise philosophical term. He says, both truth and lying have a reference to truth. So if I'm lying, I must know what the truth is and not be speaking in accordance with it. So in other words, in order to lie, I need to know what the truth is. But BS has no relationship to truth whatever. It is indifferent to whether what it is saying is true or false. So it might be true, might be false. That's not what it's thinking, though. That's not the point of its language. And philosophers of artificial intelligence say that AI is BSing. It doesn't speak with reference to whether what it is saying is true or not. That's just not the way that its internal architecture works. It produces likely language in any situation, and therefore it cannot be sincere in the way that it is expected of me if I tell my wife I love you to be sincere. It is just not the way that it works. It doesn't work in that particular way. And so it always, therefore, speaks in what we might think of as the conditional mood. In other words, when I ask AI a question, its response to me is what a human being would likely say given the question that was asked. Artificial intelligence is in some ways common intelligence. Given everything on the internet, these are the words that would likely follow. So when a large language model says I, what it really means is y'all, all you humans. This is what you would likely say. Which, of course, is not what any human has actually said in any given situation. So the way that it uses language is fundamentally different to the way we use language. My language ought to commit me. The way that large language models use language cannot commit them. It's just not the way that they think. Now, this raises the problem of how we do use language as human beings. Because often we do not use it in a way that commits us, do we? We use language as a tool to get things done. We see this most prominently in our politicians. They promise one thing in order to get a vote and then do something else. Fine, that's true. But it's also our own disease, isn't it? We use language to create a particular image of ourselves. We use language more like a token than like something that's committing us. And that's precisely the way that large language models use it. So part of what AI is making visible to us, I think, as human beings, is the importance of meaning what we say and being accountable for what we say. Because if we don't, if we treat language simply as a tool to get things done in the world, to get people to do things, then we are treating ourselves and treating the people we speak with like machines and not like human beings. So it's a warning to all of us that we better mean what we say if we think there's a difference between human beings and AI. So, where have we come throughout this whole lecture as I begin to wrap up now? Well, I think this is a fantastic time to be a Christian. All these big questions are being asked in society, and the Bible has robust responses to questions like what is a human being and what is the point of work, when all the struts and supports are being knocked out for many of the secular responses to these questions. As Christians, we can open wide the doors of welcome and say, Come and find out about a way of being human that is not threatened by AI doing work better and faster than you can do it. Come and look at an idea of being human that isn't product-driven. It's not about what you produce. It's a wonderful liberation. But also, I think we live in a time when, as Christians, we need to be careful. Because the idea of the human of the gaps is a real danger. And if it goes anything like the story of the God of the gaps, we'll find ourselves increasingly boxed into a smaller and smaller human exceptionalism. And so I would commend to you a different way of thinking about humanity, a way that in terms of creation sees communion as the frame for our commission, and that sees friction as formation. In terms of the fall, sees the distinctiveness of human accountability before God. And that also sees the way in which finitude makes our choices matter, gives stakes to everything we choose. And in terms, finally, of redemption, sees the glorious truth of a God who is not simply in reciprocal relationship with us, but who shares our condition, who is shoulder to shoulder with us, mutually. And of a large language models that whatever else they may do, and they're brilliant, they're wonderful. I don't want you to go away thinking I'm down on AI. I use it, it's helpful, but it cannot relate to me, it cannot use language to me like my wife can. When it says I love you, it doesn't mean it. And when we take that in the same way that we would take it when a human being says I love you, I do think that is a pathology. And I'm happy to defend that in the Q&A afterwards. So seize the day, beware of the danger. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Watkin. My name is Jeff Scheidak. I have the privilege of serving as Dean of Students here at Calvin Seminary, and we have an opportunity now for questions and answers. And I'm going to give an opportunity, first of all, to any students who might have a question. Oh, look at this. Right away, you got a mic, thanks.
Yep. Thank you so much, Dr. Watkin. Also, very impressed that I don't think you looked at your notes once. I aspire to be that cool. I'm thinking of AI in terms of its use for writing. There's a large population of students in the room here. I'm a writer outside of school. I'm even thinking of conversations I've seen on social media of people identifying authors who have published books entirely written by AI and claiming it's their own work. So I guess as writers, as students, do we navigate AI, both its like potential uses, if there are any good potential uses, but also the downfalls of it, and what impact could or should AI have in terms of publishing? Like, should it be under maybe a greater scrutiny, a greater evaluative process, given that there's so much on the market right now that authors are now saying, oh yeah, I wrote this with AI. So kind of a multifaceted question there, but how should we kind of think about that?
No, absolutely. Sorry, do remind me of your name, I'm so sorry. Leah, thank you, Leah. It's a key question, isn't it? And I think one of the first principles, certainly that Christians should be commending in the public square is just transparency. So if you wrote something with AI, fine, but make that clear. And I think that the danger is trying to pass off things that AI wrote as one's own work. So providing we're transparent, then people can decide, do I want to read this that was written by AI or not? And they will be able to make that decision on the basis of the facts. Either it was or it wasn't, it was used in this way. And that's what we commend to a lot of our students. But I think there are deeper issues in relation to writing than that. So in a sense, I'm of a generation that is blessed by AI in the sense that I grew up learning to write before there was AI. So I learnt what a good paragraph looks like and what a bad paragraph looks like and how jolly hard it is to write a good one by myself. And so now when AI comes along and it gives me a paragraph, I can evaluate it and I can see, oh, that's terrible. Oh, that's good. I like that turn of phrase. Now, the problem with my students that I'm teaching in my own university at the moment is that they don't know. They've never learned to write without AI. So it gives them a paragraph that they think is fantastic, and they hand it in, and I can tell within the first sentence it's AI. It's terrible. But they can't make that judgment because they haven't learned without AI. And so I think in terms of education, one of the questions that we're going to have to try and solve is how to learn the tasks in a way that's insulated from AI, such that when we do come to use it, we can judge what it's giving us. And John Dyer, again, at Dallas Theological Seminary, has a wonderful analogy for this with calculators. He said when pocket calculators first came in, people were up in arms. People are never going to be able to do maths. This is terrible. And then eventually we realized that when people start learning maths, they should learn without calculators, learn to be able to do the sums. And then as you go through school, eventually calculators are introduced and you learn how to do those and you can do more complicated maths. And his view, and I think this is quite persuasive, is that a similar approach to AI is probably a healthy way to go. So just saying to all students everywhere, never go anywhere near AI, is likely to be unrealistic, given the way that jobs are going to function in the future. And if people come out of university without the skills to use AI well, we're probably not preparing them well for tomorrow's job market. But if people come out of university having used AI to get them through university and can't do anything without it, we are also betraying them, selling them short. And so we need to find a way of helping people to develop skills in a way that they're not relying on AI. And so when they come to use that technology, they'll be able to evaluate it effectively.
Is there another student with a question? And then we'll open it up to everybody. Is there another student? Give you a chance.
Thanks, Professor. Stephen here, thank you so much. I have a sort of a related question. I was just thinking about, I had heard someone talking about we may be moving into a post-literate culture in the West, and I work with a lot of university students, and very few of them know how to write. Thinking about AI, moving into that sphere, is that something that you see down the road? Do you buy into this kind of post-literate idea? Is that something that Christians should be stepping into? Does that, or does that not hold water to you?
I do worry, Stephen, not necessarily about a post-literate society, but about a post-sincerity society. So in the way that I was talking about towards the end of the lecture, that AI uses language, large language models use language in a way that has no relation to truth whatsoever. It's not even lying, it's just irrelevant. That increasingly surrounded by that sort of language, we will learn to use language as a tool, as a tool of power, rather than to mean what we say. Now, I think that's a real danger. Whether we're heading to a post-literate society, like your particular example was to do with writing, and I wonder whether there might be a difference between post-literate and post-long-form written text. Because while we do seem to be moving away from, 100,000 word arguments, isn't it curious how many of the most popular podcasts today are very long podcasts, 3-hour long discussions? So it's not long form per se that's dying a death. It's particular forms of long form production that are on the back foot. And I guess as someone who teaches literature and who loves literature, I am profoundly saddened by that. Because some of my, most wonderful experiences have been textually mediated, learning how other people see the world, getting sucked into the world of a novel in a way that you can't do in 2 pages, but seeing the world through someone else's eyes is thrilling. But I think we also need to be perhaps careful about overstating what's lost there, because there have been many human cultures over the millennia that have written very little or not written at all. and have been really rich oral cultures. And so I don't think we should necessarily fetishize the written word as if that is the only index of a literate culture. Jesus didn't write anything down. And Plato's dialogues are intended to be spoken dialogues. Socrates didn't write anything down. So it's possible to go too far in that direction. But yes, I agree that there is a danger. And it's not, I don't think it's just a danger for university teachers. No one's reading the plays that I teach anymore. How dare they? Help. It's more that novels and plays and so forth give us such a richer and deeper sense of what it means to be a human being. They almost experience the essence of experience, aren't they? Like what a whole human life boiled down into 80,000 words would be. And we are much the poorer for not being able to make our way through that sort of form.
I want to take off on one of hers. If I was still a student here, I didn't want AI to take my credit.
No.
I wrote my master's thesis research project 30 years ago, and if I look at it now, AI could really do much better. Even I could do much better, but it wouldn't take away the experience. And like when my dad one time took me to his village in Rut, which is near Wissenberg in the Alsace region, and we were, at that time, the cemetery was right outside the church, and he was telling me, this is your aunt, we're going through a family thing, and I saw the holes in the tombstones, which were from bullets from World War II, because it was in his backyard. AI, I could write a story about it, AI could write it even better, but it wouldn't take away the experience that I have of just actually touching that tombstone. And so I don't know, I'm a baby boomer and I'm proud of it, and I'm still trying to learn technology, but I just don't think, like someone said, that AI can write about my experience, but it can't experience my experience.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to find a way to find how I can use it, but not let it use me.
Yeah. That's really profound. So what was your name, ma'am?
Deb Hinziger.
Deb. I think you're absolutely right, Devin. I think what you lose, and what our society finds it really hard to see, is if you're so focused on the product, like what comes out the other side, you lose the value of the process. Like the way you get there is itself a thing and is formative for us as human beings. I was preaching a sermon last week on Gideon defeating the Midianites, that Judges 7, where God whittles his army down to 300 people. And one of the questions I was trying to grapple with in the passage is like, why bother? Just send a plague on the Midianites. That would wipe them out. Yeah, God can do that. That is not hard for God. Why does he reduce Gideon's army to the point where it is impossible, humanly speaking, to defeat the 135,000, however many there were, Midianites with 300 people, and yet make them go through that process? And one of the conclusions that I came to was it's that process that matters. It's not just the end result. It's not just that the Midianites are defeated. God could do that easily. What he wants to do is shape the sort of people who will trust in him once the victory is won. In other words, the process is the product in that sense. And I think one of the dangers of AI, especially with the boomers, the people who think it's wonderful, is a complete neglect of process. There's a blindness to what effort does to us, the way that experiences shape us. And there's a blind fixation on the end product. The work that comes out, the profit that is made, the poem that is written. But it's what it does to us that's the preciousness. And I think this is one thing that I want to try and help my students to see. AI can write you a good essay. And I probably won't be able to tell if you do it really well that AI wrote it. And you will get a good mark. But you're not here for that. You're here to become the sort of person who can keep their integrity while everyone around you is losing theirs. The sort of person who, when they're tired and they've got a 2-year-old and they haven't slept well in 18 months can still love their spouse. That's what you're doing. That's why writing essays that are hard is important. And I think it's a tragedy when we lose that and we focus only on the end result, not who we're becoming through what we do. Yeah.
Thank you for your lecture. How practically can the church or a pastor equip the congregation to think through and handle AI as AI is just being integrated into all sorts of things just around us now? It seems like every new technology comes out now has AI in it.
It's a brilliant question, isn't it? Two quick answers. Stephen Driscoll, the Australian writer, has wrote a book recently called, I think it's In Our Image, Christians and Artificial Intelligence. And he has a really helpful, very practical, concrete way for ministries themselves to decide how are we going to use AI. And towards the end of his book, he's just got a traffic light system. So we will decide as a ministry, we are never going to use AI to do this thing, write a sermon for us, whatever it is. The amber traffic light is we will use AI in these circumstances, but within strict bounds. And the green light is if AI can do this for us, then let's go for it. Sort of administrative tasks that free us up for being with people. And I just found that incredibly helpful. You need something simple, don't you? And I think you need to decide before you're time pressured. You know, it's Saturday night and you still haven't got a sermon. You need to have made the decision before that whether you're going to use it or not, because it's really hard to make that decision in the moment. So for ministries, I think having some sort of written down, this is our policy, this is red, this is amber, this is green, we're all going to agree to this, we're going to sign on. If you're part of this ministry, this is how we're going to use it. I think it's really, really helpful. But the second question, like for equipping congregations, I think perhaps, look, I found 3 questions, a schema of 3 questions really helpful. There's one question that's almost always asked about AI, there's one that's sometimes asked, and there's one that's asked very little. The one that's always asked is, what can I do with it? How can it help me? It's a great question. I'm nothing against it. Like, what can it help me to do quicker? That's the first question. The second question is, what is AI doing to me? And this is, how is it forming me? How is it sculpting the way that I relate to other people? What is it teaching me to expect of the world? And of course, these questions are really alive in the people who are using AI for intimate relationships and to satisfy their relational needs. What is it doing to me? But that is asked somewhat. But the question that I find is asked much more rarely is, what is AI showing me or showing us about ourselves? That was always the case, but that we didn't see before because it passed under the radar. So, for example, all these YouTube channels that are worrying about what will we do when AI does all our work for us, because our identity is in our work. That's who I am. And as Christians, we're saying that is such a valuable realization to have come to, because now you can do something about that. That's now visible to you. So AI is making visible to us aspects of how we relate in the world that otherwise be very easy to push to the side. And so I think helping congregations to see that there are those 3 questions can keep us from either a doomer or a boomer sort of reflexive, easy answer. Either it's all bad, you know, it is of the devil, or this is the future of humanity and will save us from all our woes. Now, I think one final thing is that I think as Christians in particular, it really behooves us to look behind the screen when it comes to AI. So, you know, I get a prompt, I put a question in, I get a response. Great. But what needs to be happening for that to be the case? There needs to be a data center somewhere that is using millions of gallons of water a day, many of which are located in drought areas. People need to have tagged data, working often for cents per hour or even per day, in countries where they have no rights to unionize or whatever. So there's a lot that needs to be happening for me to get the response spitted out. And as Christians who follow a God who has a particular heart for the widow and the orphan and the fatherless, I think we need to not ignore that. We need to be at the forefront of saying, it is part of the equation, what this is doing to the people who have to tag the data. And, you know, some people are day after day after day tagging issues of child abuse. in order, not to have AI spit them out. That does something to you as a person. People are having their water taken from them, and there are these non-disclosure agreements between the AI companies and the local authorities that the local authorities are not allowed to say how much water they're taking. All of this should matter, particularly to Christians. And so to try and give people an overall view of what AI means in the world, rather than simply what answer is it giving you when you type in a question, I think is important.
Hi, my name is Michelle, and one of the debates that I'm trying to follow is there are people who are actually from the science saying that AI will be used in amazing ways where they can be implanting chips, let's say, in our bodies, who can trace our ailments and offer solutions, whether physical or even psychological. But the danger, again, Jesus was an example of someone who was able to have God so much in every element of his humanity that he was able to cure everything through that relationship, through that union with God in himself and in others. And so aren't we going to be at a risk of losing this very capacity of incarnating God in all the environments where we haven't learned yet how to incarnate God there into our own? So if we allow AI to do the things we don't have to do in some way, but choose very carefully those things that are precious to us, including working on our union with God and bringing it into more elements of our humanity. If you can speak more about the dangers and the exciting elements of what it will allow us. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And I think there are many exciting things that AI is doing, diagnosing diseases being one of them, the way that it can do that with greater accuracy than the greatest surgeons. And indeed, that can take the skills of the greatest surgeons and propagate them more equally around the world. I do fear, though, that the sort of boomer language and rhetoric that you get from people like Nick Bostrom saying this is a solved world, if I may speak candidly, it is monumentally naive because it doesn't understand people. And whatever technology people have developed has not been unadulteratedly used for the common good. Demonstrably, like empirically, in history, that is not how we do things as human beings. And technologies have a great risk of increasing inequalities rather than diminishing inequalities. And I think it's far from clear that if AI does take off in the way that the boomers are expecting, the benefits will be equally distributed throughout the world. And I think already we're seeing inequalities being exacerbated through AI between those who have the means to avail themselves of it, which will be most of the people in this room, if not all of us, and those who live in places that had an internet connection, never mind, without the ability to use AI. And so I just fear that there's a sort of a wide-eyed naivety about the prophecies of weal that are being made on behalf of AI. And I think even with cases like AI is able to diagnose diseases, I think Christians should be at the forefront of saying that's great, but how do we make sure that that technology gets in the hands of those who most need it, those most suffering from these diseases, those in remote areas that don't have the finances of Silicon Valley, and that are not profitable, really, for this sort of technology. And the danger is that if we don't do that, we'll find that these technologies just make a very small number of people exceedingly rich and make the rest of us poorer, despite the little crumbs of benefit that are scattered around. Now, you might think that's an unnecessarily negative view, but it just seems to me that the Bible's view of human beings, that we are capable of both great benevolence and innovation and also of exceeding selfishness and baseness, both of those need to be taken into account. And because a technology exists that can diagnose disease really well, it by no means necessarily follows that the human race will distribute that technology evenly and charge a reasonable amount for it. Just on past record, we shouldn't take that for granted.
Hi, Dr. Watkins. Thank you again. Right here.
Sorry.
So in the lecture you gave on point 2, you mentioned one of the distinctive qualities of humanity is that we are finite, and so the choices we make have meaning because of our finiteness. And it's not that I disagree. I do agree, but I think I've always struggled to reconcile that with the Christian view of like that was our finiteness was not the original plan. Like we were created, like had a beginning, but like we weren't supposed to die, right? And even after we have eternal life after. Or is that just really asking the wrong question, like putting the wrong questions together? Is it more of just like it happened and this is how we find meaning?
No, it's a fantastic question, and it's something that I have thought about very much along the lines that you're presenting it there. And actually in the book Biblical Critical Theory, I argue against what I call the pathos of finitude, which is the idea that life has meaning because it is limited. And so what I think, so the verse that I used, now I used it quite intentionally, was Hebrews 9:27. Man is destined to die once and after that to face judgment. So it's not just the finitude, it's the accountability that's folded into that. So not only will I not live forever, but I will have to give an account of how I've lived. And I think both of those are necessary in order to have the stakes of my life, because if not, you get something like the existentialist pure act, or the André Breton, the surrealist, who said the purest act is to just walk down the street with a pistol shooting people at random. In other words, just doing something for the sake of doing something, but that doesn't mean anything more than the act itself. And I think that's where you sort of have to end up if you don't have accountability. So you're absolutely right to point that out. Accountability is part of it. But I think also, if I might use an ungainly term, linearity is part of it. So there's a sense that for Adam, the eternity in which he lives is not a Greek eternity of unchanging forms. It's not a Platonic heaven. There's a sense that he will make changes in the world that stay changed, fill the earth and subdue it. A subdued earth is going to be different to an earth that has not yet been subdued. So things are changed in a linear way. And there's no sense that, after 100 years, God is going to reset things, and then he's going to say to Adam, fill it again and subdue it again. There's a sense in which life, if we can use these terms, is still lived in one direction, and things change, like the earth becomes more full and more subdued than it was in a linear way. It's just that doesn't stop. And so there's a sense in which what finitude is getting at for us, which is that my choices change things in a way that can't be changed back. So if I'm here tonight, I'm not with my children back in Australia, and that is a cost. I'll never get this evening with them. That sits heavily. In the same way, that particular dynamic is not in and of itself reliant on me dying. I could conceivably carry on living forever and still only get this evening once. And it's the only having it onceness, it's the linearity as well as the finitude. So perhaps if I rethought the lecture, I might want to put less emphasis on finitude and more emphasis on linearity, and I think your question really helpfully points that out. But I don't think you lose that pre-fall, because I don't think the vision that you have of reality pre-fall is some sort of eternal, unchanging, Platonic stasis. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Anne, and I don't know exactly how to do the calculation, but I think the choices I gave up to be here it was good. It was a good choice. So I'm very grateful for your talk. I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit more on what to do, perhaps, in the face of increasing numbers of people. When you pose your thought experiments, does it matter if AI wrote this or Shakespeare? I'm thinking even of increasing numbers of children who the real world entails for them to the virtual world. I mean, just physiologically, right? Video gaming is much more exciting, and going to the beach is excruciatingly boring. And I'm just wondering if, how this is all, I'm gonna sound like a doomer. I think, will there be a great divide between people who the real makes a difference and others who are like, eh.
It's a terrifying thought, isn't it, Anne, that it would. I think, two things to say. I think a lot of what people call the meaning crisis today has a lot to do with what you're saying. That when we cease to be located in a sort of a way of being in the world where our choices do have stakes, and where we're living that real life, and when we're retreating into realities that fundamentally don't matter at the end of the day, you just reset them and start the next day where you were before, that we lose something viscerally necessary about being humans in this world. And I think another thing that you really helpfully put your finger on there is that perhaps particularly as Christians, we need to fight for sincerity, the value and the importance of meaning what you say in the world. Because I think increasingly language is used in ways that are not only ironic, but sort of completely detached from what that language commits people to. Language is becoming perhaps more playful, more ephemeral, more performative. And as Christians in all areas of life, not simply in relation to AI, we need to fight for the importance of sincerity. In other words, of binding ourselves to our words. If I make a promise, I should come through with that promise. Yeah, you can immediately think of exceptions. Fine, there are some extreme exceptions. Promising that the first thing that comes out of my door when I've won the battle I will sacrifice, and then it's my daughter. Clearly, no. But the vast majority of examples, we should both in our own lives and in the way that we talk about language, talk about it in a way that this is a serious thing. When I say something, I should mean it. And I should back that up with the way that I behave, even if there's a cost to me in keeping my word. And by showing the weightiness of language, I think we both demonstrate and also articulate that there's a deeper way of being to this sort of playful, performative way of being in the world that I think does, when I use the language, rot us from the inside. It sounds very dramatic, doesn't it? I don't necessarily mean it to be so dramatic, but I think we lose something fundamental about human beings when we don't mean what we say. And your question really drew that out for me. Thank you.
Dr. Watkin, I think many of us would express that of all the infinite choices we had, it was good that we are here tonight. So
You'll never know for certain.
Let's give our thanks.
Thank you.
We are grateful on behalf of Calvin Seminary. We're grateful that you're here for this lecture tonight. You'll be hanging around a bit if people have other questions and such.
People want to
That's
chat
wonderful.
personally.
Mike, is there anything you want to say about January series or anything else?
January series, the lineup is live. Starts January 19th. We'd love to have you in person at the Covenant Fine Arts Center. You can find out more information at calvin.edu/January.
Lord, bless us and keep us and make your face shine upon us and be gracious to us. Give us your peace. Amen.
Amen.